Ladies and gentlemen, good morning. It's a great honor to welcome you today to the CTT Capital Markets Day in what you can see is sunny Lisbon. It's a great pleasure to see in the room today some of our largest shareholders, some of them since the IPO. Also, something that gives me great pleasure is to see more than 20 research analysts in the room. As you know, 2 years ago, we had 4. And also, we have many market participants from Portugal and abroad here. We have some of our corporate access partners. We have some of our corporate bankers. And of course, we have many of our CTT colleagues who helped us in the preparation of this day, 6 months in the making. We're standing here today just hundreds of meters away from Torre de Belém. It is a monument synonymous with the age of discoveries, a golden age, and also the single most trade-generating, growth-stimulating event in the history of mankind. It is something that generations of Portuguese have since tried to emulate. Of course, and luckily for us, the expectation for today is much more modest. Here's what's in store. We will start with a political and economic overview by our guest speaker today, Mr. Luís Amado, followed by a presentation by our CFO, Mr. André Gurjão Costa, on the 9-month 2015 results. Since we presented the results 2 weeks ago, and the management webcast was on the 5th of November, we will not do Q&A today, but in the coffee break that follows, you can ask André or myself any questions that you might have. Today, of course, for those of you who are aware, marks exactly 2 years since the day the CTT IPO prospectus was published and the management roadshow began. The years that followed, as we described them in our results presentation, delivered on the promise made back in 2013. The main presentation today at 11 a.m. will be on the strategy and Banco CTT going forward. So it is time to renew our promise for the next 3 to 5 years. Lunch will follow, and the Q&A. We'll have Q&A during the lunch, which will be in the adjacent Feitoria restaurant. And you will be seated with management on your tables, but I urge you to please ask your questions out loud. We'll have microphones passing by, so you can ask your questions and everyone can hear, and management can respond to your questions and everyone can hear the same answers. We will leave the hotel at 2:30 en route to the CTT post office in central Lisbon. Given that we are several weeks now away from the opening of Banco CTT to the public, it still doesn't have the branding of Banco CTT. But what we'll do is we'll show you today, here in the morning session, we'll show you a video of how the branch is going to look when the Banco CTT is open. So you will be able to do a compare of how it looks now and how it's going to look afterwards. And you will see that it already has a dedicated financial services section in the branch. At around 4 o'clock, we should be arriving at the Lisbon Sorting and Logistics Center at Cabo Ruivo. And we'll do a tour of the sorting center and a short presentation there as well. And for those of you who are going back to the airport, we will be providing transport back to the airport. And those remaining in Lisbon will be providing transport back to the center of Lisbon and back to the hotel. I hope you find this program today interesting and informative. And please help us with your Q&A, make this day a very productive day. I now give the word to the Chairman and CEO of CTT, Mr. Francisco de Lacerda.
Thank you, Peter. I hope, yes. Thank you, Peter. Thank you for coming and be with us for this day. It's for us really important to be able to spend time with you and not around the clock as usual on those conferences and roadshow type of presentation. I think today we'll have more time to go deeper into the issues and to be able to clarify whatever you think it's useful to clarify. And also to see physically some of the premises. I also always think that it's an advantage to come to Lisbon from time to time because it's a very nice place to stay and live. But even more important than that, to see more faces and not only the usual ones that visit you from time to time. And so I would start by presenting some of the top team members of CTT, and I ask each of you please to stand when I present you. And so, as you know, we have, I am the chairman and CEO, and then we have lead independent director who plays the typical roles of lead independent directors in a proper, organized corporate governance scheme. António Gomes Mota, who is seated here and will address you later on during the day, he is the lead independent director. And on the management team, apart from myself, we are 5 at the top. You have there Manuel Castelo Branco, who then you have the CFO, André Costa, that you know well. And you have, after him, Ana Jordão. And then Dionísio Ferreira, who is the head of both Post and Express and Parcels business units, and also will address you later on during the day. And then from the bank side, you have the CEO of the bank, Luís Pereira Coutinho, and you have the CFO of the bank, Luiana Nunes, that is also here with us. We have other people here, but I think these faces are the one that I would like you to see, and we are the ones that at the top level run the company and try to develop the things that then we discuss with you. Now, entering into the first topic, I would just very briefly put this slide where we just summarize the latest forecasts for the Portuguese economy done by the Bank of Portugal, the European Commission, and the OECD. And the basic conclusions there is that GDP is growing, and everyone forecasts that it will continue to grow in the near future. Domestic consumption is growing, not as fast as it had grown in 2015, but nevertheless with a sound growth. And as you know, one of the issues that we face is that if consumption grows too fast, we can create other imbalances. So it's good that grow, but not too fast. And for our business, consumption growth is a very important indicator. And then you see that the unemployment still has a forecast of going down, and the budget deficit with the current plans to go progressively below the 3% and in a trend to be more balanced in the future. But this is information that you know. It's just to recap and to put on the screen.
Now I turn the word to Mr. André Gurjão Costa, our CFO, who you know very well. He will present a short presentation on the 9-month results. Thank you.
Hello, good morning to all. Most of you know me. We already been in some meetings. I will try to go, I wouldn't say fast, but I will go throughout the 9-month figures, just giving you an idea what is behind the figures, what were the activities that we were doing behind the figures. Because we had 2 weeks ago, we had a presentation about the numbers, so I will not focus a lot on the numbers, because that I believe you already know. And at the end, we will revise, or we will revisit the guidance that we gave in July, because there were some questions about it, so we will revise it. We will focus on the key highlights, business unit performance, and at the end, we will revise the guidance, or we will revisit the guidance regarding the 9-month results. Regarding the figures, as you see here, what we've got, it's we put here two scenarios, one showing including the postal bank project, which nowadays is more than a project. As you know, we already announced that we will start operations on the 27th of November, so it's more than a project. It already has recurring costs, so we put also a scenario excluding the postal bank recurring cost, which is the scenario that we call the like-for-like, which is the one when we gave the first figures were the one we had in mind when we did the comparison with last year performance. If we look, yes, I will put here. If you look at the recurring EBITDA, the recurring EBITDA grew 3%, but if we take out the cost of the bank project, it grew 5.8%. Just somewhat below our guidance of high single digit, but on the track for that. Regarding the net profit, we got recurring net profit of around 16 million euros. And if we take out the bank project, we have around 62 million euros. So this was based, as it was shown in the document that or in the slide that you saw before when Luis Amado was talking, this was based in a recovery of the economy. You see that the mail volumes are continuing to perform better than we expected at the beginning of the year. We were expecting that the normal trend of decline between 3 and 5% would come at a slower pace that is coming. And the main reason behind it, it's because the economy is recovering fast than it was anticipated. And more than that, and very important for the mail volumes consumption, the domestic consumption is recovering relevantly this year. If you look at the figures, it is estimated that we'll reach the end of the year with a 2.6% growth in domestic consumption, which is very important for the economic activity inside the country, so for mail consumption. Regarding the other business, we got a growth in the parcel business, coming a lot from e-commerce. You need to recall that e-commerce is still a small part of the parcel business in the country, although a bigger part of our business because we have a higher market share in the B2C parcel business than in the B2B, because the B2B has the international flows, which the big players are the ones that continue to capture the international flows, like DHL and the other ones. Saving flows. This year, we are declining. We had a very strong growth last year. We had a very, very strong growth in January. And we said at that time that this would not continue. This was an overshooting effect. And now we see that the last year performance in terms of capturing savings could not continue as it was. But we are declining somewhat from a very strong growth that we got last year. And you need to take into account that although the economy is performing very well, the savings of the population are starting to decline. We had in the last months some of the lower levels in terms of savings from the population, which also affected our saving business. Regarding revenues, I would just highlight, although with different performance, that all the business areas grew in terms of revenues. As we said when we started this process, it was very important for us to assure that we got growth in all business units, and more than that, that we got growth in the revenues of the overall group. Although we do not believe that the mail business, it's a growing business, it's a business that we told you that we will defend the value of the mail business with all the levers that we can use. Pricing lever, it's the one that we use most, but also some new services that we can add to the mail, some new services that we can render in our retail network, which is helping also the performance of the mail business. All this put together helped us to have a growth in the mail business in the 9 months, also because the decline in the volumes were lower than the one we anticipated when we put the new pricing scheme. So we are having a higher growth in the mail business than we were anticipating, but that is what we target for. Target to have or to defend the value of our mail business. On the parcels, we are still facing the restructuring in Spain, which is affecting more than the revenues, is affecting a lot our profitability in Spain, but also the revenues. Because everything that is changing or everything that is in restructuring always has negative impacts, not only profitability, but also in revenues. So the growth in the parcels, you see, it's not double digit as we have in Portugal, but it's single digit because of the performance in Spain. In Portugal, although you see when you look at the figures that we don't see the growth so big, it's because we still have a relevant proportion of our business in Portugal that was banking-related services, which is still declining because bankings are restructuring their business, are reducing the number of branches. Since we do the branch internal mail and the branch head offices internal mail, if we have less branches, we have less business. So it's a trend that we believe it's reaching a plateau, but we don't know. And if you look, and Luis will talk about it, if banks are reducing their size and reducing the number of branches, it makes it easy for our banking business to grow. So it has the positive effect in other business lines. On the last, financial services, although with the lower volumes, is still growing 6.3%, which shows, first of all, the resilience of the business. It shows a lot that the stock of savings that we placed and the performance of other business, namely the transfers, which is recovering, help us to keep a growth in this business, although compared with last year, the saving volumes are declining. So overall, the revenues are growing 1.9%, coming from all business units. You see here the evolution of the between 2014 and 15. I will not go in detail on this, but basically I would only mention that in 2014 we had a 3 million non-recurrent gain coming from the upfront from our credit consumption partnership with CTLM or BNP Paribas, which we took off to show you the evolution without that. Regarding operating costs, I would highlight the first point, and it's very important for you to take into consideration, is that we are always worried about costs. Not because we are growing, we took out the focus on keeping a very efficient operation. And we did several things this year. Most of them will not have a relevant, or will not have the full impact. Relevant, yes, but will not have the full impact this year. You recall that last year we did the renegotiation of the IT contracts and communications, which the impact was present throughout all this year and will be present until the year and will continue for the future. We got a 14 million euros reduction in the costs of external supplies from these two items in our cost structure. So, renegotiated last year with full impact in 2015. What we did this year, we did several measures, the renegotiation at the beginning of the year of the healthcare plan. We did the new company agreement with unions. We did the integration of the networks. We did several things. But as every measure or any initiative that we do, the full impact will only come in 2016. Some of it, namely the renegotiation of the healthcare plan and the company agreement, will only come in full in the second half next year. So you need to take into consideration that with the positive evolution in external supplies coming from the IT and communication renegotiation, but with the strong measure that you'll see in our strategic outlook, it is very important with the introduction of the variable remuneration that I would recall last year we already decided to reintroduce it, but last year it was considered as non-recurrent because it was decided at the end of the year, and it was decided based on the strong performance that we had got from the renegotiation of the healthcare plan. This year becomes a recurrent cost, but we intend to absorb those costs increasing. the ones coming from the variable remuneration scheme, but also the ones coming, if you remember, with the salary increase that we did with the renegotiation of with the new company agreement. We said that we would absorb these costs with the IT and communications renegotiation and the other measures. It's not fully covered this year, but will become covered by the end of the year and potentially for next year, because it was what we said in the beginning of the year. It was a strategy that we put in place. You see here that the recurring costs grew 1%, but basically, if you take out the 2.1 million euros that we got from the exchange rate variation from our partners in the international mail, you see that we are more or less stable levels. And if you do not consider the comparison of the variable remuneration, we would be at a lower level. By the year end, we expect to have, as we said, like-for-like recurring costs to continue to decline. Postal Bank project, which I would like now to call Banco CTT business. If you look at the 9 months, we had 2.8 million euros of recurring costs, and we had 4.8 million euros of non-recurring costs. I would highlight that we could have considered all this as non-recurring costs, or we could have considered all these as setup costs. But we discussing with our auditors, we said that all the costs that are here to stay regarding the structure that we are putting in place, namely people and IT infrastructure and the head offices of the bank, are costs that are here to stay. We consider them as recurring costs, so it's here as recurring costs. But that took the difficulty of putting the like-for-like comparison without considering all the costs as investment in the bank. If you remember, we said at the beginning of the year that we would have a 30 million euros investment in the bank. We didn't disclose the split between CapEx and OpEx, basically because we didn't know at that time what we would spend in OpEx and CapEx, because nowadays, even IT, we can do it as a service. And when we started this, we had on our tables the proposals from the providers of the core banking system that could be software as a service, SaaS, as it's called in the IT language. So we couldn't give because we would evaluate the best way to do it. And some of the things, as we told you, we will try to have outsourced everything that is standard in the market regarding the banking. We will only have operations from the part that we think it's core. So we could not split at that time what would be CapEx and OpEx. So you see at the end of the 9 months, we have around 16.5 million euros of investment in the bank between CapEx and OpEx. We, as we said, will invest up to 30 million this year. So we are on track for that. In terms of EBITDA. EBITDA, you see that we have a very weak performance from Express and Parcels, basically coming from our Spanish restructuring. And the restructuring in Spain is taking longer than we expected, is being more harsh than we expected, so is more than affecting the revenues, as you saw it in the previous slide, is more affecting the profitability of the Express and Parcel business. In Portugal, Express and Parcel is performing strong. In the last quarter of the year, it will perform even stronger because, as we told you, we did the integration of the networks with full impact on the last quarter. So if you look at these figures, you see that we had a relevant growth in the mail, 6% in EBITDA. And to have a 6% growth in EBITDA in the mail business, basically, if you look at the first slide regarding the revenues, is because we are becoming more efficient. Why? We grew less in terms of revenues. If we are growing more on EBITDA, it's because we are becoming more efficient. What is hurting, what is making our costs growing is basically the costs coming from the restructuring in Spain. Without that, you see in the mail business, you see in the financial services, that the profitability of the business is growing faster than the revenues. So this, I hope it shows you that we don't regard less the cost efficiency measures that we need to take for the future. Something that all the mail companies, and I saw this morning in the numbers of Royal Mail, everyone is worried about their cost structure. Why? Because we know that the mail business will not grow, so we need to be more efficient. What we told you, and we'll see in the presentation of the strategy, is more than continuing to cut costs and cut structure. What we are doing is using better and better our structure. And with all this, I believe, being a dividend player, as we are, what it's also important to take into consideration is the cash flow generation. You saw when we presented the results of the first half of the year that everyone was very happy about the results, but everyone put questions about the free cash flow generation because we had some impact from some large customers that were increasing our working capital. Now we corrected almost all of that. We paid the variable remuneration, and we got the 15 million from Altice. With all that, you see at the end of the period that we have, compared with last year, a growth in the free cash flow. So we continue to generate a strong cash flow for the company, which enable us to go, and I would pass this slide, and I would go to this one. It enables us to have a very strong balance sheet. I would highlight here that although, and we'll talk somewhat about that during the 3-year performance overview, although we did some measures that had impact on the income statement or in the cost side of our balance of our income statement, we took a very relevant measure regarding the renegotiation of the healthcare plan, which had a very strong impact in our balance sheet. It doesn't seem because we reduced our interest rate or discount rate from the healthcare liabilities from 4% to 2.5%, but it's very relevant. And you see that our balance sheet continues to be strong. Continues to be strong to provide us the ability to keep up with our dividend policy. Continues to be strong to provide us the ability to finance the strategy that we'll present you after the coffee break. It's strong because it's one of our strengths in our market. You need to take into consideration that the Portuguese market is a market where most of the players, and namely our competitors even more, are leveraged, strongly leveraged. So having a strong and no debt balance sheet enable us to keep up delivering to our shareholders and delivering on the strategy. Because any mail company that wants to win the future needs to invest in new opportunities and to develop the business, because the ongoing current business is declining, more or less, but it's declining. Mail, I would just highlight the increase in the profitability, in the EBITDA margin. It grew. So it shows what I said. The integration of the networks, it's important for the parcel business, but it's also very important for the mail business because it enables us to use part of the spare capacity that we have in the mail business. We always have some spare capacity to do more activities. We have to increase the capacity that we have in our mailman network, but we also use some of the spare capacity with the integration of the networks. So I would tell you that the focus in the costs and the focus in the profitability of the business, it continues to be very important. In these 9 months, we grew in revenues and we grew in profitability. So the outcome was very, very positive. But we can have some quarter or some years where we will not grow in the mail business, but we will always have the focus in preserving the value of this business. I would just recall that the evolution on all the mail volumes, I would just put an attention on the advertising. It declined double-digit in the last years. This year, it's growing somewhat, and it's growing less than it grew in the first half of the year because economic recovery always drives more advertising, more publicity, and with that, our advertising mail business has an opportunity also to grow. We are and will present we are taking some measures even to make it more relevant, but we are taking the advantage of the market and capturing all the value that is in the market to provide us the growth in our business. On the other way around, unaddressed mail, and this was, I would say, the less expected outcome from these elections. It was, I wouldn't say it's the less expected, but it's one of the less expected, that the mail consumption, namely the unaddressed mail consumption during the general elections, which is always a very strong election period, was not as strong as we expected. The parties saved some money in putting advertising to the voters, so I don't know. But it was less than we expected. We told you that we were expecting good performance in the third quarter coming from this, but it was worse than we expected. In terms of Express and Parcel, we are doing several things, and we'll see in the strategy, regarding the revenues. But what we did, and we are doing several things regarding the revenues that will have impact for the future. So, to be prepared to capture the full value in the revenue side and not worrying so much about the costs, we did the work in the cost this year, and Dionisio will talk somewhat about this, what we did regarding the integration of the networks. But we already had some impact in the 9 months, but the full impact will start to be seen in the last quarter of this year because the integration of the network is finished, and Dionisio will show the results of it. Financial services. Highlighting the first point, if you take out the banking costs or the banking recurring costs, the growth was 16.5% in recurring EBITDA. So with the growth of 5.8% regarding the recurring operating or decline of 5% on the recurring operating costs, it shows that the potential of taking value from this business, it's the one that will also take the advantage when we start the operation of the Banco CTT. It is working in a cost base that we already have. This is our retail network. It is driving not only revenues for the financial services, but will always also bring revenues for the mail business. Why? Because the retail mail business network will receive fees for the services that are rendered in the retail network. With financial services, we have already a strong portfolio of services being rendered. With Banco CTT, we have even more. So one of the drivers also of the growth of the mail business will be the growth of financial services, as has been in the last years. So when we talk with people that manage the retail network, we don't ask them only responsibilities for the mail business. We ask them responsibilities for all the businesses that are sold in the retail network. So when they have their objectives, it's not only mail, but it's also mail, other services like citizens bureaus and financial services, and Express and Parcels, that the relevant point of sale is our retail network. So this is also a driver as Express and Parcels for the growth of revenues in the mail business. And since some of you had questions about the guidance and the outlook that we gave at the end of the first half, and the questions were, are you revising it? We said we aren't revising it. Since we are not revising it, but we are putting a new item on the outlook and giving more color about the performance that we expect for the end of the year, regarding the address mail volumes, based on the performance of the first 9 months, we expect that the decline will be more between 3 and 4% than the 5% initially target and the one that we used to do our price increase. In terms of revenues, we expect that they can come from all business units, the growth in the revenues by the year end. In terms of operating costs, as I told you, without the recurring bank costs and on the recurring base, we expect to have a decline on the recurring costs, which means that the measures that we put in place, even though with the increase or the introduction in variable payment and the increase in salaries that we did, we expect to achieve the end of the year with a reduction in the recurring like-for-like recurring costs. Regarding the EBITDA growth, we're still confident that we can reach the high single-digit growth on the recurring EBITDA like-for-like. We finish this 9 months with 5.8%, somewhat below the high single-digit. I would say that the high single-digit starts at 7. We are confident that we can reach the end of the year with high single-digit growth on recurring EBITDA like-for-like. We needed to take out the cost of the bank because even though the bank is starting on the 27th of November, it's not yet generating revenues or relevant revenues, so it's still on the setup stage to open in the first quarter of next year. With all this, I would just like to introduce a new point that already came in the Bloomberg because the guys from Bloomberg are faster than we are. But we are confident. We always said in the last years, or in the last 2 years, we always said the dividend that we are comfortable to propose to our shareholders before the year end. So this year, since although we have a very clear, I believe, strategy or dividend policy, stable growth in the dividends, some of you put some questions about what does this mean. In order to take those questions out, the board is confident that we'll be able to propose a minimum dividend of 47 cents per share, which means around 70 million euros of dividends for the financial year of 2015, payable in 2016. So I would finish the overlook over the 9 months with this. We are confident with the performance that we had, with the performance that we expect to have until the year end, to be able to propose next year in the general shareholders meeting a dividend payment of 47 cents per share, which is a growth of 6.8% regarding the recurring EBIT of last year and the small growth regarding the dividend that we paid overall last year. Thank you very much, and I will talk later to you regarding the 3-year performance. Thank you very much. Now we'll go to a coffee break, which is 15 minutes. We will meet again at 11 to start with the strategic outlook. Thank you very much.